Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I've got Jerry Gerken here. He is a husband, father, Christian, fellow Apexer. He is the six-figure salesperson's sales trainer, and he's been on a couple stages now. We're going to get into that and how sales impact, or sorry, not sales, but how speaking impacts our sales. So clearly, I need a little bit of speaking coaching here to get on stages like this, but he's also a podcaster. I was recently on his podcast, and Jerry is just a great guy all around. Really excited to talk to him. But Jerry, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Man, I appreciate the introduction. That's a lot to take in. You know, a lot of times you don't listen to what you've done, and a lot of times as entrepreneurs and drivers, we think about what's next, and we very rarely take the time to reflect on the accomplishments that we have had, because that's just not how we're put together. But I appreciate those kind words, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show. And for me, man, I started out born and raised in a small farming community, like 3,000 people. It's all about pride and all about who you were. Sports was very relevant in my life. I was a really good wrestler, and that took me to a lot of different places, nationally, internationally. I was wrestled in 6 national championships throughout my career. That was back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I think maybe before you were born, I don't know, but anyway.
I was born in the early 90s, so
okay,
maybe
so
partially
I
when
went
I
in
was
the Marine
alive.
Corps. Went in the Marine Corps after a short stint in college. Got in the Marine Corps. Ended up wrestling in college. 2 weeks after I got in the Marine Corps, I met my wife of 30 years. Got a couple daughters, and they're wildly successful. Got in the sales industry out of necessity. I had a sports med degree, an education degree, couldn't find a full-time teaching job. So I got into the car business out of necessity. A friend of mine was a general manager of a car dealership. Got into that, was wildly successful. And a short time ago, a few years ago, I decided to jump into the coaching space in that sector. So my target is basically to help young salespeople identify and establish a simple, seamless, and easy process where they can be wildly successful, and they don't have to go to the old school mentality of transactional selling and more go into relationship selling. And that's been very beneficial for me. And that is a very brief thumbnail sketch, but I got a lot more there.
Yeah, so it sounds like a very full life you lived already. That's really awesome, and glad to have you here, Jerry. First question I want to ask you real quick, and ever since I've known you, you've been very outgoing, so hopefully you can remember what this was like. But how did you get over the fear of public speaking?
So I think it was early on in my high school career. I was a 5-star thespian. I was in 5 musicals. And one of the things, and maybe a lot of the listeners can relate to this, and you can maybe as well, but one of the directors told me to imagine the audience naked. And so by doing so, I was like, all the fear was gone. It was like, this is hilarious. This is funny. And then the other thing is understanding that your audience, they don't have the script memorized. And so when you make a mistake, you know you made the mistake, but you got to continue to roll forward because the message has to continue to go, and you have to share that message with whatever that message is going to be. But understanding that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to mess up, but as long as you practice, drill, rehearse, memorize, personalize, whatever that message is going to be, then you can infuse that message however you want at different states. And if you mess up, you can backtrack and then revisit it at a different time and bring it back. So I think the practice, drill, and rehearse was definitely a key in understanding that they don't know what your message is. So if you mess up, just keep moving forward. Do not allow that little voice in the back of your head to tell you, man, you're messing up, you're failing, you're going to fall. So I think those are a couple keys that has helped me to get over that initial fear of public speaking.
That's so good. And I actually did what you talked about. I messed up at the beginning, obviously, giving your intro. some people may have not noticed, but then I pointed it out. So that's a very good point. And I know I brought that up before in coaching calls with people about the fact that people don't know your script. They don't know where your speech is going. So if you happen to get points mixed up, it's okay. Keep going with it. Unless you already kind of listed those points out, that might be a different thing. But yeah, it's a great point that you bring up there, that people don't know what it is that you were going to say next. So if you happen to say the wrong thing next, keep going. They're not going
Yeah,
to
I mean,
notice.
if you say it with confidence and conviction, then that's what they're going to receive, you
Yeah.
know. But if you're stammering and stuttering, and then your body language exudes the fact that you're messing up, then that's what they're going to pick up on as well, and that's where the hecklers come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So you mentioned kind of some steps that y'all did though, and you mentioned memorize, and it was it personify, or what was that last part that you mentioned?
Personalize, memorize, and
Personalize.
personal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you memorize the script, but then you personalize it because you don't want to sound like words you used off mic, like a mindless automaton. You know, you use that in the engineering phase when we were talking about some of the people that you have interacted with. You know, they become automatic or robotic in a way. So you don't want to be a mindless automaton and just recite words and the inflection in your voice, you know. But memorize and personalize is definitely a huge key, because we live in a time right now where authenticity and transparency are the new rage, you know, really authenticity and transparency. So if you're authentically you and you're transparent in your message, then some people are going to resonate with you, and those are the people that you want to connect with. You know, some people aren't, which I get it. It's no big deal. There's 7 billion people in the world, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're authentic and transparent and you've memorized and personalized the message that you want to share, you're going to touch lives.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then the ones that you don't touch is because you've repelled them, because you're not for them, they're not for you, however you want to look at that. So it's a great way for people to identify if you're with them or not. And I really like that you mentioned about personalized as well. We see that when people memorize their speeches, even though they wrote it all out, it's like, oh, I got to say that in the right order, and it gets very robotic. But on the sales side as well, and so I'd love for you to expound upon this. But we hear about sales scripts all the time. Follow the script, follow the script, and it's not meant to be verbatim follow the script, but follow the sequence of events that you're supposed to walk that customer through. So talk to us a little bit about that, because sales, while it's not like a prepared speech, it's more of like an impromptu speech, but there is a lot of preparation and knowing your product, knowing rebuttals that are going to come up, you know, any kind of objections and things like that, and how to handle that. But it still is a little impromptu and not necessarily prepared. But how do you go through a sales script, if you will, or how do you coach people on speaking better and not just being memorized and robotic with that sales script?
So we're all in sales, whether you realize it or not. For all the listeners out there, you're in sales. You know, if you have children, you're in sales. You're trying to sell them on why they need to put their coat on before they go to school because it's cold outside.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a baby and you're trying to feed them beets because you know it's good for them, it's healthy for them, and they turn their nose up because all they want is the applesauce. You sell them the applesauce, and then you slide in the beets. We're all in sales. So memorize and personalize is huge, but when you're on a stage, you shared this on my podcast. Facts tell and stories sell. So if you understand and you embrace the fact that we're all in sales, when you're on stage, you're selling your message to your audience, whether that's on a one-to-one kind of sales encounter like I do, or it's on a stage of 30 or 40, 150 thousands of people. You're selling that audience your message and what you want them to understand. And you sell with emotion and you close with logic. So that's what I teach in the automotive sector. And you can use that in any sector, really. You sell with emotion. So you get them geeked up about whatever your story is, and then you logically close the deal so it makes sense to them.
Hmm.
but you've set it all up with your story and your sale.
Yeah. Okay. So walk us through that a little bit. How does that look like to set up that emotion? Because just like in that sales conversation, it's most likely some random person, or maybe in a sales conversation, you may have had conversations with them a couple times before they're finally there to have that conversation, perhaps. But then on stage, a lot of times there's people. Maybe you're very popular, like one of our mentors, Ryan Stewman. So a lot of people already know him, but there's a lot of people that don't know him. So he's got to be able to create that emotion within these people that don't know him as well as the people that know him. So how do you create that emotion?
So when you're engaging with somebody or with an audience, and maybe you know the audience, and I'll just speak to the automotive sector. When I'm engaging with somebody, if I've never met them before, then a few things that I'm picking up on is their body language, their family dynamic. If they're married with children, you look in the car, there's a car seat in, you walk up to the vehicle and you see a couple bumper stickers and they got some pets on the back of their bumper sticker. It's just, you have to be cued into all the different things that they're bringing to the table. That's who they are. So when you're speaking to them and you're telling stories about, and you know that they are pet lovers and you know that they've got children, you want to talk about safety, you want to talk about space, you want to talk about all these things, and then you present stories that back up that. So like, for example, if you're all about safety, you know, this vehicle has side door guard beams that'll withstand a 35-mile-per-hour impact without penetrating the cabin. So if you're driving down the road and you go through a stoplight that's green and somebody blows a stoplight and they T-bone you, guess what? This car is designed to push the car as opposed to allowing this to enter into the cabin and get to your kids.
Hmm.
You see that visual?
Yeah.
So I've just told that story, but it's all relevant to the car or the vehicle that they're looking to purchase. The side door guard beams is one. Then there's the curtain airbags is another. We've got these deep ditches out in the county. You could be driving along and you'd be looking at an eagle flying across the sky. You're a distracted driver. You drift off and you go down this berm and the car starts to topple. Well, these curtain airbags have rollover sensors on them. And what happens when that car starts to topple is the curtain airbags deploy and they drop down, and it'll protect your family even before an impact. But you notice my inflection.
Mm-hmm.
You notice my enthusiasm in this. You notice the
Yeah.
visual. So that's the story's sell.
Mm.
Okay, I'm selling the story, but how did I get to that point? I paid attention to the cues and the clues from the customer, because when I was interacting with them initially, I noticed all these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. Yeah, noticing who they are, what vehicle they're driving, especially in the automotive space. What we're talking about right now, what vehicle they're driving, what things they're really looking at. Because you probably see them kind of going up to cars, maybe they're looking at certain things, and you can start to get a feel for that. And even just asking that question to start, like, hey, what's the important things that you're looking for in your next vehicle? I mean, obviously, you might not want to start with that exact question, but as you get into it, you kind of fact finding with those questions, and then you can start telling stories about, yeah, like you just mentioned, beautifully mentioned about that. And I just got a chills thinking about that, about how I want to protect my daughter and everything. And that's really neat to think about how the car is manufactured to be able to take that impact, but then also not just try and sit there like a solid block, but actually kind of move with the car, also the way it's designed and everything to really protect the child. Because yeah, as parents, we're all so worried about our children, even when they're from what I hear, I don't obviously don't know this yet, but when they're grown and gone, we still worry about them every
Yeah,
single
but
day.
it translates over to speaking on stage. And let me give you a
Hmm.
really quick story, because stories sell, right?
Yeah.
So when I approach a corporation and I'm looking at wanting them to employ me as a trainer for their sales staff,
Mm.
I will tell them this story. There's a lumberjack. He's out west and he's looking to get a job, but there's no work. So he goes to this mill and he asks the foreman, "Hey, can you give me a shot?" The guy says, "Okay, I'll give you a shot." So the first day he goes out and he chops down 3 trees. Comes back, the foreman says, "How did you do?" He said, "I chopped down 3 trees." He's like, "Okay, you keep that pace up, you'll have a job at the end of the week." Next day, the guy comes in and he doesn't take his morning break, and he works all the way through that, takes his lunch, takes his afternoon break, comes back at the end of the day. Foreman's like, "How many trees you cut down?" He said, 2.5. He's like, "Man, you got to pick up the pace." So next day, the guy decides he's going to cut his morning break, he's going to cut his lunch break and go and do his thing. Comes back end of the day, he's like, how many trees you cut down? He said 2. Foreman's like, it's not working out, man. You're just going to have to, collect your check and get on the way. And he's like, I don't get it. He's like, I'm working harder, I'm working longer, but my production is lower. And the foreman asked him one question. He said, did you take time out to sharpen your axe? And that's what I'm here to do when I go to work with a sales team. I'm not here to change your process. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. I'm here to sharpen the axe that's already there. You already have an established process. Let's just tweak a few things and let's make things happen and the bottom line grow bigger. So that story gives you that visual. That's, again, you talk about it, facts tell, stories sell. I just gave you a story that gave you a visual that, oh, now I get it. Yeah, you're just going to help us sharpen a few things, tweak a few things to help us be better. And that's the close.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And even to that point too, a lot of stuff, like you said, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're not teaching them anything brand new necessarily. You're tweaking a few things that you see from that outside view to help them. And it's the same thing for us speaking on stage. It's not necessarily that we have to go up there and teach something brand new. It can be the same thing that people have heard, but because of the way you say it and the stories that you share and that picture that you paint for them, that's going to make them actually, it clicks in their head like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now. And they can finally take action on that. So I really like that story. Creating that emotion is so important when it comes to sales or speaking on stage.
Yeah, 100% for sure.
Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned about getting on some stages at one of the local universities to you, right? So can you tell us how was that being on that stage? And then after tell us about that, like how did you go about getting on that stage?
So being there was cool. I mean, I didn't have the fear of being there because I'm just confident in who I am. Now the content preparation, I did take a lot of time to prepare because I wanted to be over prepared, because as you know, and maybe some of the listeners know, the clock does go by pretty fast, but your content goes by pretty fast too. And you can run out of content, even though you've got, you think, a plethora of content. If you're going to speak for an hour, I had an hour in all, I've done it a dozen times and I always have an hour. So I've always created a bunch of content, but I've tweaked it every time just because different things come about and I think of different things and I get some feedback from the professor that, hey, you want me to talk about this or you want me to talk about that? Give me some feedback. So I've never really struggled with that so much as far as the content, but how did I get there? One of my coaching clients, life coaching clients, he is a professor and attorney at the local university. And he just asked me if I would speak to them. And so I was like, sure. What do you want to talk about? And the last Friday when I spoke, you never know, you don't really know unless there's a standing ovation or a bunch of people come up afterwards and shake your hand and say, hey, thanks so much. You just don't know. So this particular time, none of that stuff happened. And I walked out and that was it. There was a little bit of a round of applause, whatever. And then I walked out. So he called me later that day and he was like, you know what? There was 4 different students that approached me afterwards and really shared their appreciation for you being there, because whenever they have like speakers come in for a specific job field or a specific major, they're usually talking about the same stuff they've already heard. So that's where that law of familiarity comes in. The law of familiarity, you're going to hear this over and over again. It sounds like the Peanuts cartoon parents or wow, 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 wow. They're just going to tune it out. So here I am. My platform's personal growth and development. I'm just talking about how to grow you as a human being. I wasn't talking about engineering. I wasn't talking about safety and all this other stuff that they normally hear in these settings. I was talking about how to grow yourself as a human being. So it was refreshing to them. which was really cool for me to get that feedback. But you just don't ever, not all the time do you get that feedback. But that's how I got the opportunity. And then the content just kind of takes care of itself. This one was a little different though. I decided to have like 3x5 index cards.
Mhm.
And this was more because the relationship that I have with the professor is he shared with me, he was having a hard time getting a read on the audience. So I had 3x5 cards, and each one of the students wrote down 3 answers to 3 different questions. And I gave them, like 10 minutes. I played some music and let them just be lost in themselves. But one of the questions was, what are you struggling with?
Mm.
And we didn't get to those cards because we ran out of time. I got to a few of them, but what are you struggling with? And one of them I did read, and I didn't read it out loud, but I'm away from my family.
Man, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. And those are things that, as adults and as professors and as leaders, we don't necessarily think about, but it's
Mhm.
real.
Yeah.
So that gave him some feedback to know about that student so that he can be more empathetic toward that student.
Mm.
It's powerful.
Yeah, that is. That is. So you got on that stage because of the connection that you had. And while that may seem like, oh, that's easy, you got a connection that got you on stage. You and I, we're both in the entrepreneurship space, and our people that know us the best oftentimes don't really support us as those that don't know us as well. I think we've seen that within Apex. We've got a lot of cheerleaders, if you will, within that group, but the people we've known for 20, 30, 40 years, they don't support us the same way, which is kind of weird. So having somebody that you have a close relationship actually support you is a pretty big deal. I mean, it's awesome that he did that. But I bring that up to say, what are some of the things that you did in order to get this professor that you knew and had this relationship with to be willing to put you on the stage in front of his students?
It's so very simple. And you and I both know what it is. It's add value, add value, add value,
Mm.
add value. One of my core values is generosity, and I give, and I expect nothing in return. So I have poured into this professor numerous times over countless months of just conversation, but I'm always bringing value in something for him to grow
Mm.
himself as a human being. So as that happens, the other there's 3 laws that I teach. And one of the first is familiarity. That's what we talked about a minute ago. This one's
Mhm.
reciprocity.
Mm.
I kept adding value to his life, and he felt like, man, I gotta give this guy something. And then
Yeah.
he respected and appreciated the value I was adding for him. So he wanted that because he cares about the students, for the students to have the same effect. So that's what happened there. It was just that law of reciprocity and just adding value, adding value, adding value, adding value, adding value. You cannot add enough value to the marketplace. And that was a lie that I had to overcome a number of years ago in the sales training space, because I was holding stuff back and I didn't
Mm.
want to give it all, because then what? I don't get the comeback. I go to
Yeah.
an event and I pour it all out there, and then they want me to come back and then I got nothing. Well,
Mm.
that's a lie. That's a lie, because you always have something. And if
Mm.
you're, one of my other core values is personal growth and development. If you're continuing to grow yourself as a human being, continuing to grow yourself all the time. I read a ton of books. I watch a lot of stuff, listen to a lot of podcasts. If you're continuing to grow yourself as a human being, you're always going to have more content or more value to add to the marketplace. So squash that lie, blow it all out, and then blow it all out the next time.
Mm. Man, that's so good. And like we kind of talked about earlier, even though you share something and they already know the information, the way you share it, the stories that you share to back up the information you're trying to give helps them understand it better. And it gives them that different perspective. So it doesn't matter whether they've known it or not, or if you already talked about it or not, as long as you're not literally repeating yourself, to the same exact audience, like try and change it up a little bit. But we've seen speakers that do that same thing where it's pretty much the same message. Ed Milet's one of them. Jesse Itzler, these big time speakers, they share that same message, but they tweak it just a little bit to change it up enough where it's not literally the same scripted thing, because they've gotten better with their speech and doing that over and over again. So yeah.
Let me pause you for 1 second.
Uh,
Okay, so have you ever done like the Psalms challenge? Or I'm sorry, not Psalms, Proverbs, where you read every proverb so it coincides with each day. So like today is whatever said day. Let's say it's the 17th. It's not, because I don't know when this is going to air. But let's say it's the 17th. You read the 17th proverb. Okay. And then next month, you're going to read the 17th proverb on the 17th. That message will be different to you. And the reason why is because you're in a different state. You're in a different state of being. It's a different state of mind. You're in a different state of your world is in a different state. It's the same words, but you're in a different state. That's why these messages take on different effects to you emotionally, because you're in a different state, in a different world that at that time when you receive that. Maybe it's the same information, but you receive it differently. The same thing is with Proverbs. And the same thing is when you're on stage. So refine your speech, refine your message, identify your message that you want to get the audience to understand. And maybe you touch one this time, maybe you touch 20 the next time, because they're in a different state. It might be different people, but they might be in a different state and they receive your message.
Yeah.
But do not allow the enemy or the little voice inside of your head to tell you that what you have doesn't have value and merit, because it does. It does.
So good. That goes back into the coaching too. I know you brought it back to the stage, but even with the coaching as well, give all that information out, or being on a stage too, give all that information out, because depending on the person's state, they're going to pick up something, and the next time they'll pick up something else. And then also with that, I know Gary Vee talks about this a lot. He gives everything out for free. That's more on his marketing coaching side, whatever you want to say. All of his content he creates, he gives everything out for free, because he knows people aren't going to take action on it all. I mean, we can't regurgitate everything that somebody taught us anyways. We can't have everything written down and execute completely on it. So don't be afraid to give everything out, because like Jerry mentioned, the more that you give, the more reciprocity will end up coming back to you. So if you're just giving, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, Jerry, you gave me so much value here. How can I ever repay you for this? And they're going to want you to come back and keep talking, which is how you keep getting on stages. It's not by holding back that third part. So you got this 3-part method, and you're only giving me 2 of those parts and not the third one, because you want to hold that back for me to come back and speak, or I want to hold that so that I can come back on your stage and tell that third part, which is top secret. Or, oh, you only get that if you pay me as a coach. You got to be my client to get that third part. No, share it all. It's going to come back. And it may not be, if I'm trying to get you to be my client, Jerry, and I give you everything, you may not come back and be my client, but I guarantee you're going to talk to somebody else who will come be my client, because you're like, oh man, Philip was so great. And you talk me up and you tell about the 3 steps to, getting on stage or whatever that looks like, that 3-step method to them. And they're like, man, I want to learn that. And they come to me. So it comes back one way or another. It may not come back from the person or the people that you talk to directly, but it'll come back to you one way or another. So I love that.
Yeah, I felt bad this last week after I was done, because I'm sure that you do the same thing, but you sit in reflection after you're done and you're like, man, how did that go? What did I say? Did I do this right? A lot of times, like even in my podcast, I'll have to re-listen to my podcast, because I'm so engaged in the conversation that I remember. So it's good for me to re-listen to it so that I can revisit it. But I've felt like I missed a very important part in this last public speaking opportunity with these students, and I really want to make it right. And that's part of what we were just talking about. Is not that I wasn't holding it back intentionally. I just forgot about it. It was just a part of the process that I just missed. And it's about fear and doubt.
Hmm.
And do you know that fear not is in the Bible 365 times?
I did not know that. Wow.
How many days are there in a year?
365.
That's
Most
not
years.
that's not a mistake,
Yeah.
365 times, fear and
Yeah.
doubt. How do you overcome fear and doubt? With knowledge and skill. Where do you get the knowledge and skill? You get the knowledge and skill from listening to podcasts like this, to reading books, to going to seminars, to finding coaches, masterminds, investing in yourself. That's what Warren Buffett said. The number one thing you can invest in is yourself.
Hmm.
But when you get that knowledge and skill, do you know what that gives you? It gives you the courage and confidence to overcome that fear and doubt.
Hmm.
And that was the thing I missed in that last one, but I'm going to make it up to them. I'm going to go back there. They're not going to know I'm showing up. The professor will, but I'll just pop in there and just say, hey, I missed one thing. And here's what I'm going to tell you. And that's what I'm going to go a little more long winded than I just did here. But fear and doubt, man, it's real, and it's in everybody's life, whether they want to admit it or not. But the knowledge and skill is how you overcome that fear and doubt. And that gives you the courage and confidence to move forward.
Man, that's good. So I want to recap here real quick before we go on to our final question, that how you get on stage, from my understanding, and correct me a little bit if you think there's a little bit more than what you did, but essentially you knew the person. Maybe three things. You had a conversation with them and you provided value. You continue to provide that value, and you made a connection with somebody first. You made the connection, started providing value, and that's how you end up getting on that stage.
That's pretty much how it went down. Yeah.
Yeah. And that wasn't overnight or anything. So I know a
No,
lot of people think that, and I know you didn't say that, but a lot of people think that, oh, I just have this idea to get on stage. And actually, one other thing I want to ask you real quick about that, because I know you do sales training, and this was more on like personal development. Is that kind of what you talk about on stage mainly, or is it sales training as well? Like what are you focused on, like speaking about on stages?
So
So
it
I think
depends
that's
on
an
what
important thing as well.
it just depends on which stage. I mean,
Okay.
if it's a group of salespeople or
Hmm.
corporate executives, or if that's the theme, then I'll shift it that way.
Hmm.
But for the most part, I get my kicks out of watching people succeed. So if I can share anything with you that's going to grow you as a human being, I mean, sales is cool. I love it. I think it's great. It's got its place. We're all salespeople. Like I said in the earlier stages of this podcast, we're all salespeople. And the sooner you understand and identify, whether it's in a one-on-one or a group setting, that everybody's dealing with something, and you can't just use a cookie cutter approach. And you have to understand that everybody is going to receive information different ways, whether it's words of go back to the 5 love languages, man. I mean, words of affirmation, physical touch. Be careful in the corporate world about that.
Yeah. Or getting out there, just jump into the crowd from the stage, physical touch.
Right. Right. But gifts, some people are motivated by money, and I think that's a lot of the managers. If you're listening, a lot of the managers out there, that's what you think. You just think you can throw money at an employee and they're going to do whatever you want. Well, that's not the case, man. A lot of people are motivated by words of affirmation, an attaboy, a thank you, a gift, an accolade, a little trophy, a plaque on the wall, just something that shows that you recognize that they are doing a good job. So those are some of the things in the sales sector that I talk about. And then in the personal growth and development space, there's a whole bunch of different things, but it all relates back to what you talked about, is stories. Stories sell. So if you can paint the picture, and that's what all our big time speakers do, is they're up on stage telling stories.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And they relate it to a message at the end. They think of the end in mind. How am I going to get to this place? And here's how I'm going to start. And here's what I'm going to do in the middle. And then I'm going to bring you around, and then I'm going to bring you, and your emotion is going to be up. It's going to be down. You're going to be crying. You're going to be laughing. And then we're at the end, and now you feel exhilarated. And you're like, man, this Mother Fletcher was amazing.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what is that what happened?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's all we do. That's all we do.
Yeah. Well, even with that, you'll leave a conversation, you'll leave a speech. And what do you remember most of a speech, of a conversation with had somebody?
How they made you feel.
Exactly. It has nothing to do with what they said, the
No.
information you got from them. It's about how it made you feel. Every once in a while, you might remember a funny story, but it's probably because it was so funny and it related back to you. And it was a feeling that you had from that story, not necessarily that the story was a memorable one or anything. So, yeah, make sure you're selling on those emotions essentially, that you want to make sure you're drawing those emotions out, whether it's on stage or selling. Don't just speak numbers and talk about how, oh, this safety feature costs this much and this and this and this. And that's why we come up to this price of $40,000 for this 5-star safety rated van, like, okay, cool. Yeah. Tell me about what happens if we drift off into a ditch after a long day going out with the family out to a water park. And I happen to get a little too tired and I drift off into the ditch. What's going to happen? Is my family going to be safe? The air curtains drop down, the airbag curtains drop down, things like that. Yeah. Draw
Yeah.
out that emotion, tell that story. Don't just tell me the numbers of, well, because of all these super sophisticated safety features, this is an extra $10,000 add-on. Like at the end, you're gonna have to have that conversation. That's where that logic comes in, right at the end, and the sales portion. But have that emotion, tell those stories. That's what's gonna really get people to remember you, not the logic.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, oh, cool. Jerry, man, I appreciate you coming on. I do have the one last question to ask you. And that question is, if you had one message you could share and only one message you could share for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
Do the next right thing. And I'll
Mm,
expand on that a little bit. We all have an internal compass. We all know right from wrong. It's just whether you want to live in the gray area or not. But you know what the next right thing is. And if that's picking up that piece of paper in the parking lot, pushing in that chair, picking up that paper towel that somebody left lay in the bathroom, stopping off and helping that little old lady fill up her car with groceries, we all know what the next right thing to do is.
mm.
It would just make the world a better place if we all adopted that.
Yeah, it sure would. It sure would. Man, yeah, that definitely was. Do the next right thing, even if you don't want to do it. It's going to be the better option for sure. Jerry, man, appreciate you coming on, sharing the value that you did, sharing the knowledge that you did. If people want to follow you, get to know more about you, where's the best place for them to reach out?
Oh man. So social media, Facebook, at Jerry Gerken, on Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel. Just spell my name right, Gerken. And if you're looking me up on my podcast, it's the Jerry Gerken Show. And when you're searching it, the Jerry Springer Show will come up first, but I'm not as popular as he is yet.
Yeah, I like that. Not yet. Yeah, you're going to be there soon enough. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, Jerry, appreciate the time, man.
Always, man. I appreciate you, and I love what you're doing, and I think that there's definitely a need for this niche that you have with helping people get over that fear and gain confidence. And then you also, the next phase is to set them up with stages to be out there, and then to continue to coach them that way, which is really super cool. And I love what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah, my mission is to get 1,000 people on stage. So, ways to go. I've got 6 on stage so far, so only 1,994 to go. Or sorry, 994 to go, not
Yeah, I was
1,000.
gonna say, I
Wow,
thought
man,
you were an engineer. Where's
yeah,
that math
yeah.
come from?
Well, that's one thing we talked about in engineering school. Once we started doing all this complicated math with multiple variables and all this craziness, lots of calculus, addition and subtraction like went out the window. It's just by the time you could think about the simple thing, it was too simple and you just overthought it. So
I'm like
yeah,
Planet Fitness. There's no judgment here.
yeah, I appreciate it, but you called me out on it, so I feel like there was a little judgment. Jerry, I appreciate it. Thank you all for hanging out and listening to this. Make sure you share this and follow Jerry to get more great content from him. He's always put out a lot of great content, and make sure you check out his podcast as well. It's a good one.
Appreciate you.